Game begin.
Welcome to Spy Colony episode 31. I am here with three players who can block warriors: champion Bill Ellis, Michael J. Flores, and I'm Lanny Huang. Welcome to the pod, Bill.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
In fact, you're the best at blocking warriors. You blocked all the warriors. You didn't have a chance to block Michael J, but you have not lost a match of Premodern in a 7-day span.
So to be fair, he defeated me in the last round of the meetup with the same deck 2 nights before the meetup that the $1,000 tournament that he was. So he blocked the hell out of this warrior and basically this.
Yeah, and then you proceeded to add many more Sabo's Web to your deck.
Yeah. Yes, I did, because I was pretty like, so what happened the last time we had $1,000 tournament is Itai won it with Fuck It We Ball. And so Fuck It We Ball won the $1,000 tournament that weekend. And I was just like, oh, if history repeats itself, Bill is going to win, or, you know, whatever, Red Green is going to win.
And this is the only science that Mike subscribes to.
And so I'm like, either I could just join. So here's the thing. I was like, oh, maybe I should play Red Green also. Like there's some good evidence that this is the best. Or I could just add Sabo's Web to Blue White 12-12. I told you, Lan said that I had a chaotic mind that week.
Yeah. So Lan comes, or Mike shows up, and he's like, Lan was like, I can't talk to you anymore. Your mind is too chaotic. And I was like, well, Lan is Professor X. Like,
oh my God.
He's just like, his brow is like furrowed. He's like trying to peer into your mind, and it's just pure chaos. And he's like, you must leave my presence. Your mind is too chaotic.
Last night, me, Johnny Magic, and Lan went to go see a midnight showing of Starship Troopers, and my sister came also, and she brought like one of her college friends. You would have loved it, Lanny. It was just like my sister and Lan tag team making fun of me at like 3 a.m. in the West Village. You would have loved it. Like, oh wow, look at these people bouncing off of each other like an episode of Friends.
I got a little bit of a taste of that before you showed up to Movie Club on Wednesday. It was my first time meeting John. And John was like, "Oh, you're Mike's friend," and he just like unprompted. I was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm friends with I play Magic with Lan and Flores," and he's like, "Oh yeah, Flores," and then he just 5 minutes, just like, bam, 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 bam.
These are my best friends of 30 years. Just to be clear.
I know.
Literally meeting in the village at midnight to go to a movie.
I sense I get
at age 47, right? Like, you know,
I get the vibe.
He was 16 years old when we first started playtesting together for Pro Tour 5.
Yeah, I get the vibe, but it was just so funny. And then like midway through, he's just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm ragging on Mike so much, but he was like incensed. He had like heard your name, and then he was just like, ugh. I mean, it must be tough. It must be tough to be John Finkel, and everyone around you is just like not nearly as good as Magic at you as you, and some of them write articles.
I don't. Oh my God, John. Because we hang out circa once a week for the last, or more for the last 30 years or something. And, it might be like the end of the night. Just be like, what are you gonna get paid to write down that I said to you this week? Like a version of a thing that he said to me one night. I'm like, I don't know, say something smart.
I mean, it's great.
Pay rent.
It's great because you like to tell the story about how he's just like, Mike, you make one mistake per turn.
Yeah.
So John just tells me, he's just like, Mike makes one mistake per turn.
Well, he said that to you?
Yeah. And I was like, I know. He told me you told him that. I'm like, but he said it in a way that was like, oh, I've learned a lesson about myself. And John was like, no. He just makes the stupidest mistake every single turn he's like, he'll have a really obvious play and then just a dumb play, and then he makes the dumb play every single turn.
I think it's interesting because I think if you're John Finkel, that's your interpretation of when other people make.
I agree. I think that's how I would spin it too. I was like, obviously,
you're like, this is a world class player, but they're being observed by John Finkel. So it's like, oh, I see that you
very humble of yourself to call yourself a world class player.
Any world class player. John's watching any given world class player, and there's like a 2% adjustment wrong. He's just like, what a bonehead.
Yeah,
what a bizone his Ed.
I wish there was more tape. Where you could like see John's hand and like some tape to watch him play, because I would love to get some analysis on that. The podcast already derailed. Bill already heavily spoken over. In fact, he hasn't been able to get a word in. No, but I have one more thing to add. Because I was thinking about this. You check out, a recurring theme on this podcast. You checked out Humans of Magic. Javier Dominguez was on the Humans of Magic podcast, and he said something that I thought was so interesting. He said he tries to develop a system. He tries to put to words an understanding of like what the best play is. So he's like, a lot of pros, they're just like intuitive players, right? They're just like, they make the play that makes sense to them, and they can't always explain it. And he's like, I always seek to explain it. I always try to create a framework in which I understand why X play is the correct play. And I thought that was so interesting because, as we've talked about in the past on this podcast, and maybe John would have a different attitude. Maybe John just thinks you're unteachable as a Magic player, but John couldn't convey, what made him so great. And I just thought it'd be interesting to
I
watch some
literally
tape.
tried to write a book with John, and that's how Finkel Drafts and Movie Club was born. Actually, when I tried to write a book with John, I found it to be impossible to get anything out of John's brain that anyone else could process. And the problem is, like, I think he's probably the Uber version of like the intuitive player that Dominguez is talking about. I think he's just like, if you like took your concept of how Fran plays, so like the 99.999th percentile in ability, John plays constantly for advantage bar. So like he makes every play so that advantage bar moves in his direction, but his view of what would contribute the advantage bar is far wider than I think though the average person. Like, it's like they're not looking at like incremental, like, oh, at the instant that we're looking at the advantage bar has gone up. Like John's looking at like, okay, if we play this game for an X number of turns, which is the conceivable amount of turns that this game might go, I'm actually maximizing the area under the advantage bar. Okay, so if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's how he plays. And he can't explain that to somebody because they would actually have to have an understanding of like the depth of the game, such he's like, oh no, well, if the following things will happen over the course of the next 4-turn sequence, then I have gained an advantage bar in this conjectural future turn.
Yeah.
And that's beyond most people's conception, and including world-class, let's say, Magic analysts.
World-class analysts.
It's just
a very competitive field that pays very little money.
Very little money at this point. It was once a lucrative profession, I have to tell you. Promo code Flores.
Anyways, Bill, please, for our audience, we are 10 minutes in. We're allowed 10 minutes of banter. It's 10 minutes in. Let's get down to business.
Only because you missed the carbohydrate section.
Bill, yeah, it's true. It's true. We would have had 15 minutes of banter. You'll have to check that out in bonus episodes of the Before We Hit Record, in which I tried to restructure all the funny stuff that happens before hitting record on the podcast. But this is just a law of nature. Anyways, Bill, please tell us a little about yourself and a little bit about, your kind of background in Magic and how that turned into your background in Premodern, and whether or not you are an intuitive player.
Hey, so I'm Bill. I started playing Magic. It's funny because, we play at Bifrost, and, they have the thing where you have to spend a certain amount of money to like play in the weekly events, or the bi-weekly event. It's once a month at Bifrost, but we technically do bi-week. Anyway, getting lost in the details. I found the first card that I ever saw in one of the boxes, and I had to buy it. It was Katerin Overlord from Mercadian Masks. It was like the card that was like on all the packs, because when I first encountered Magic that I can remember, I was walking into a card store to buy Pokemon cards when I was like maybe 9 years old. And I saw this product and I was like, what is that? Like, it just looked so much cooler than Pokemon to me, even though I'm still a Pokemon fan and enjoy Pokemon a lot.
It's like chubby Pikachu versus like Hero getting his neck ripped out by a Phyrexian.
Yeah, it felt way more mature, And like, I don't know, just like I had to know what it was. And so I ended up getting packs of Magic cards instead of packs of Pokemon cards that day. And I learned how to like, you know, when you're playing as a kid, you like kind of know the rules until you like really know the rules. So there was a lot of like, I remember thinking we thought Ancient Silverback was the best card because it was like a 6/5 that could regenerate. And we thought regenerate meant bring it back from the graveyard and just put it right back on the field, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, a little bit of playing during like Mercadian Masks and like Nemesis, but without like fully knowing the rules. Like I didn't go to the LGS or anything. And then kind of got back into it. I think Judgment had just come out, and that was when I started playing like at the LGS a lot. And so you can see where this is going is like, you know, I was playing during Psychotog, Standard, and Madness, and all these things. So I stopped playing the game probably around right when Kamigawa came out. And that was like, you know, Affinity Standard was just like you played Affinity or you lost the game.
Yeah, you fell off when very many legions of players fell off. And in fact, the future of the game was conceivably in danger.
Yeah, when you are choosing between playing the same Affinity mirrors every day or going skateboarding with your friends, it's like, and you're in high school, you're like, I'm going to pick skateboarding every time, you know? So
you could definitely have played green white in that era. Green white was the best deck.
What? This is the Tooth and Nail deck?
Well, I mean,
Astral Slide with main deck, Infinity Oxidized.
Julian Newton won with the Astral Slide version, but Kibler played my version at Nationals that year. We sided into a Tooth and Nail deck, but the main deck was just, you know, Oxidize, Akroma's Vengeance, you know, Decree of Justice, Eternal Dragon. It's like very much
Bill and I actually ended up down the same road because when it became apparent that impressing potential dates in high school,
you're gonna go with girls on this one.
Took priority. All of a sudden, the Magic cards started looking like a liability, and you know, I never got too deep into skateboarding, but you know, it was when maybe I was joining some garage bands and
sure,
changing the way I dressed and the music I listened to. So at the same time that Magic was at its lowest point as a game, we were just like ripe for
ripe for other hobbies. And
I always chose Magic over no matter how pretty a girl was. I always chose Magic.
Famously.
My biggest crush of all time when I was like 22 years old, she asked me out to dinner and I played in a standard tournament instead.
Which standard though?
Yeah, surely not Kamigawa standard.
Yeah,
no, it was 1998. So I think I had Dothy Slayer in my deck that night. This is before I understood the Prime Directive. My deck had like Gemstone Mine, Dothy Slayer, It was just like a Sly deck, but with like black creatures.
Yeah, this was the deck that birthed the Prime Directive.
Yeah, it actually literally was the deck that birthed the Prime Directive. So I was very close to a ratings based invite. So I wanted to just play in every sanctioned tournament I could in order to get on the Pro Tour. So it was very close, right? And then instead I went 0-3, and I went 0-3, and I probably outranked everybody else in the tournament by 40 points at the beginning of the tournament. I obviously hemorrhaged my entire rating, and then also the girl that I liked. When I got back from spring break, she had a different boyfriend. So, you know.
You kind of failed the Prime Directive of Magic the Gathering. You also failed the Prime Directive of life. It's just like you forwent a strictly better activity that night, not just the strictly better deck.
Prime Directive.
I didn't even really like sushi yet because I was too young. You know, like I hadn't gotten safe for sushi, and she wanted to get sushi. So
yeah.
Mike, you're like, no, I'm just going to play these Dothy Slayers.
Yeah, the sushi restaurant gives you an out in the form of the California roll. Like, you know, there's always an out. Anyways.
Oh, I also ate carbs back then, so it would have been okay. But this is like, you know, she ended up being, you know, the biggest crush of my then young life, and I literally chose to go 0-3 in a Magic tournament and go out.
That's all right. You know, I would just tell myself I didn't have a chance, anyways. All right, so we start skateboarding, and we stop playing Affinity Mirrors.
Playing Magic. I mean, Magic is the kind of game, though, and I tell people this, that like don't play Magic. It's the kind of game where even when you're not playing, it's very interesting to think about. And I think it's like, I'm saying this to the right people because, we're podcasting, but also one of the most prolific, writers on Magic. So it's like, it's just the kind of game where you don't have to be playing it all the time. You can just think about it. And like, there's something satisfying about like thinking about potential plays or builds or like how decks play out. So I wasn't playing for many years, but I would every so often stop back in on like, look at like, what are the decks people are playing now? And there's like a satisfaction of like looking at a list and looking at all the cards and like, oh, I can see how, like what the idea is here and what this deck is trying to do. And there's something satisfying about that.
Yeah. Just click onto like top 8 lists and just kind of read, or just like spoiler season would come out or like the new spoiler would come out and just like reading the cards. I totally get you. It's like,
so Bill, I just want to go back to something you said a second ago before I forget. So you said that Magic looked like a more mature game than Pokemon. Is that because you saw cards like Earthbind or perhaps Elvish Ranger from Weatherlight?
No, I hadn't seen Weatherlight. I mean, this was like right when it must have been, I think 99, and Mercadian Masks was Mercadian Masks, and so it was like mercenaries and rebels, and like it just looked like the art style looked really intense and like gritty, and like there's something that like I think looking at the art, even now looking at the art style from Mercadian Masks, it has something kind of distinct about it that I really like. Kind of like there's like kind of like these pirate kind of characters, and like it's just something like with the art direction of that set that was really cool. Even though it's been often called a not very powerful set, but even though it has like we have like Dust Bowls from Masks, right? Like there's a lot of good cards in it, but
I love Mercadian Masks. That was one of my favorite formats ever.
It's kind of poetic that Bill started his first phase of Magic the Gathering from the power level correction from an overpowered artifact based set, and ended this chapter on the power level correction from an overpowered artifact based set.
He picked a good window. There's not a better window, but
yeah, I think so. I mean, I really like that. Like it's funny thinking about, because I've been playing Standard a little bit recently, and so it's my first time playing Standard in like forever. And I was looking at it now, though. It's like, man, all these decks cost like $300+ Like thinking about Standard when I was a kid is like you could get in for like $100 to $200 and like be playing something like actually like viable. Like other than mono red and Standard now, it's like
that's your deck you've been playing though. But
I've been playing that in Dimir, which is like a
mono red is still unacceptable. Like the price on Bloodthirsty Adversary is just like not really something I'm down with.
Silly.
How much does that cost?
20, yeah.
Yeah, they're going like 20. I mean, I picked them up at like 7, and then like 2 weeks later they're 20, and I was like, "What did they do?"
I've had mine since it was legal. So
Bloodthirsty Adversary is, for those who don't play contemporary formats, is a hasty bear, and it's a mythic rare from.
It is a pretty good special ability.
It has text on it, but like not enough text to make it a $20 card.
No, right? I'm in full agreement there. It's like. Beyond like unless you're at turn 5, which how many times a burn do you actually want to be at turn 5? Like, you just want to close that up. I mean, I've won games with the ability, which is like
you've killed me with a Bloodthirsty Adversary in the last month.
My point.
That's true.
My point
was worth every penny. Then
is more
literally.
It earned
anybody who reads my stuff, I'm like, oh, I trade games with Bill, like all different formats. Like we play like 50% against each other, like every format. Bill Ellis is the person who I always like. Oh, I'm always trading games with him. Yeah. And the last time we played was in Standard, and he killed me with the fucking Bloodthirsty Adversary. Just in case you were wondering, he cast it. He bought back a lightning strike, and I died.
The thing that's obnoxious is that Bloodthirsty Adversary, just by virtue of being a mythic rare and being playable in Standard, is $20. Like it's not like a card that's playable in any other format. So if any like sweet card comes out and it's a mythic and it's like, oh, this is like cross format all-star, like Shieldred, right? Shieldred is supposed to be expensive. It's playable in every format.
card that you have to own 4 copies of that's like $90 in print standard. I feel that is more unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I just think the price tag of most contemporary Magic right now is just like, obviously I'm buying in, so cool, like they're getting their money, but like also it's just like, holy shit, like I feel for people that are like, especially like younger people, it's like, you can't like coming back to old, like the standard that I played when I was a kid. It's like, you can play Psychotog and just not have the fetches, and you have like, an 85%.
Wait, fetches were like $3, man. Right?
Fetches were like $12 that I remember
really?
when I was a kid.
Oh man,
yeah.
Maybe I got something wrong.
I just have to say, just riffing on what Bill said a second ago. Murders at Karlov Manor just came out 2 weeks ago. Is that right? 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, we just had the PT.
Yeah. So friend of the podcast, a good friend of mine, Roman Fusco, won an RC queue a week or two ago with blue-white control. He's like, "Oh, you got to play blue-white control." I'm like, "Sweet, I already have blue-white control." Geared up, ready to go. So I was supposed to play in the Pauper 1K with Bill tomorrow, but instead I'm going to play in a standard 2K and try to get on the RC tomorrow. Because Roman told me to play Blue White Control, and I'm like, "Oh, are there any cards that I need from the new set?" And he's like, "Well," and so like even with promo code Flores, it's like $85 in just new cards.
Hey, what did you get? The No More Lies and what else?
Like No More Lies.
That's Scry, the land that.
So Meticulous Archive, which is the Scry land. No More Lies, Ezrim, and Deduce. And then I bought some like sundry other stuff that I might not have had, like the Eternal Wanderer, I think. That's the 6 casting cost one. Not Wandering Empress. I had that one already. So like I was literally $85 in on, and there was only one new set that came out, and I already owned a blue-white control deck that I made top 4 of the previous RCQ with, right? Like that's insane to me that like it just came out. And I had to update so many cards in what was a deck that was viable 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So
boo standard. All right, let's get back to Premodern.
So when I get back to Magic is, and this is maybe a lot of people can relate to this, during the pandemic, I was living with one of my best friends at the time, and we're sitting around, we've played every video game, we've watched every movie, and I'm looking around, and I had never heard of Pauper before, but this is one of those moments of like, I have all this time, like, oh, let me look at what's going on with Magic. And I see this like budget format that, you can play Counterspell and Lightning Bolt, and like this looks kind of cool. And I just told my roommate, I was like, "You're gonna have to learn how to play Magic because
you're stuck with me."
Yeah, that's just what's happening.
Brah. You're like 2 prisoners in a prison cell. Like this is like a dumb thing, but I always think that like if I ever went to prison, like I would definitely just start drawing Magic cards. And
I think about like how many cards can I actually remember?
Yeah,
and like.
That is a thing that was done by someone in prison, and they play tested with themselves on Magic cards that they wrote on pieces of paper and then sent articles in for, I don't know, probably a world-class transcriber of other people's Magic articles. And
or other people's thoughts in general.
That's how they got their start as themselves being a world-class Magic theorist. Not naming any names.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even tell who you're talking about. Anyways... Pauper, roommate.
Yeah, so we start playing, I teach him how to play, and like it's funny how you forget that Magic can just like melt time. Like we would be playing and like we would start playing at like 5-6 p.m. when we get off work, and then suddenly it's like midnight and we're like, oh my god, like it's like, oh, but one more game. So just got immediately fully back into it. Suddenly I'm like buying cards from Card Kingdom like every other week. Just like building out like a Pauper collection. And then I noticed like I was playing a little bit I bought like a webcam, and I was playing some webcam leagues that were really fun, and like webcam weeklies, and just kind of like getting like really back into the game. And through like the webcam stuff, and also looking into like, is there any format where you can play Psychotog? Like that's how I find out about Premodern. And I see like, they have the Rock is a playable deck, and like this is back in the era of Premodern when it was like almost all webcam, and Landstill and the Rock were like tier 0. They were like the best decks. And
Bill, Was your
Yeah.
first meetup ever when you played the Lanny Rock and I played Landstill and you defeated me?
No, that wasn't my
Your
first.
first
So I played a little bit of webcam during the webcam era. I never played in like a monthly or anything, but I would just do like pickup games. And I like the first deck that I got was the Rock. And I also built out Madness with like the only cards that I kept from when I was a kid was my Madness deck. I gave everything else just like to college friends. I hope that they're enjoying those cards now because I wish I had some of those back. But I did keep my like old Madness deck, and yeah, so I built those two. And the first meetup that I went to, the meetups were like really unstructured. This must have been 2021, like late 2021.
Oh, way before me then. Me and Lanny were not in the scene yet.
Yeah, this was the era of the spicy. I think Phil said it was in Queens. Was it in Queens?
Yeah. So I worked in Queens at the time, and so I could just walk to this place after work, and it was like I think it was like a monthly meetup, and it wasn't like a tournament bracket. There wasn't like, and it was like most of what we did. Like I went there with the Rock, and most of the decks we were playing were just like literally like unstructured, like kind of just like random ideas, and like the
it's
Rock,
just like what
it was like
in the box.
Yeah, it was like way too strong. So I can't remember the guy's name, but they had put together these like really interesting. It was more fun to just like jam with like their They had like they came with a box of like 70 decks, and like they would play kind of like 4-player games. These were like some of the wildest games.
So
of
it
Magic.
was like Commander, but with pre-modern decks.
But with pre-modern, and these were like the most wildly structured. It was like if you went through just like a random pile of pre-modern chaff and just made up like random decks, but they were fun games. Like, but it wasn't like pre-modern like I was playing when I would play on webcam. And
right now, Lanny's thinking those are just the decks Mike brings. Wait for it. What if I played a deck and it was just all Sabo's webs? Be like,
yeah. So they were cool meetups, and then there was one meetup that I went to with. I think like Phil kind of hosted it. It was at like some bar in Manhattan. And I can remember like Roland was there, and I specifically but there was no like bracket at the time. I specifically remember there was a guy there who was visiting from Russia on like a business trip, and he had just randomly found out about this meetup, and he came, and we probably played like a best of 7 or best of 9, like Rock versus Elves. We just played, and it was like those were really fun games. It was like but there's no structure to those meetups. So I would say like the first meetup that I ever went to where there was like an actual like we're playing and there's like a bracket and we're like, people are playing, everyone's playing like a deck that is like a deck, like an established deck, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like was the meetup that you and I played.
Yeah. So I just want to like note something about Bill for the listeners at home. Bill said he only ever kept his Madness deck, but if you look at the decks Bill plays in 2023, 2024, his decks are all like Mono Gaia's Cradle, Survival of the Fittest, and Mox Diamond decks. So I think he might have ran right past this is an affordable format, like past go a few times.
Oh, so my Gaia's Cradles are the gold border ones. But yeah, we're talking about Magic being expensive, and I've definitely used like a little bit of money I got here and there. I'm like, that's just gonna go to pre-modern this month, So yep. I've definitely
just do a little bit of earmarking, some budgeting. Open up your budgeting app and set a goal for your Mox Diamond of the week, and you're good.
Well, I am very good at the budgeting. There's maybe a little bit of a flex, but like I did pay off my student loans in 2019.
Oh, nice.
Congrats.
So like, and that was a more difficult process than buying Magic cards, in terms of like, I mean, there was probably like several years where every day for lunch I was eating like a can of garbanzo beans. Like I was really like in the weeds budgeting, and like since then have like gotten jobs that pay better and don't have student debt. So it's like, it's easier for me to budget now. Like, okay, like I can get like a I don't have a ton of cards that are like Mox Diamond or even Gold Border Gaia's Cradled, but like I have, I can get a few things here and there,
Yeah, you can get yourself a treat.
Yeah.
So is your engagement with Premodern, have you felt like, I mean, I guess it's just like a simple question. Do you have the fire? Like, are you like, you're playing in standard RCQs, you're playing in Pauper 1Ks, and now you're winning Premodern 1Ks. Like, do you feel like, what does competitiveness mean to you? Like, what's your relationship with, pushing yourself to win at all costs?
I wouldn't say I'm pushing myself to win at all costs, but like, I definitely like, it's just, I always want to try to improve at something, and games generally are a great vehicle for self-improvement, I think, because you can have measurable improvement, right? Like you can be like, oh, my results have gotten better. And Magic is an interesting game for that because you can be the most skilled player in the room and still not get the best result.
Tell me about it. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, based on our finals. But you can make measurable improvements. And like one of the improvements that I'm trying to make this year is just like, I just want to play cleaner games. Like I want to have like, cleaner board state, cleaner, like I go to combat, like I announce, like, because I feel like, I've just like been playing and like, I'm definitely more of an intuitive player. But like after playing the RCQ, which that was my first RCQ ever, the standard RCQ that I played in January, and seeing how the players like at the top tables, because I went 3-0 into 3-3 at that RCQ. And when I got to the 3-0 table, like just the way that people were playing, it was like very clean. I was like, oh, like this is something about that is admirable to me. And I want to clean up my play.
I actually think you're a more impressive player than most of the players that I'm playing in the back half of an RCQ or in the top 8.
You think so? I mean,
yes.
I will take that.
Like I did not do well in that particular RCQ that you're talking about, but Lanny always says just like top 8 is the lowest acceptable outcome for me, right?
Sure.
But like I played like, I don't know, a dozen RCQs in the last year, and I'm way over 60% to top 8. I think like you're definitely better than the average player playing in the second half of an RCQ or in the top 8. That is my opinion.
That.
Yeah.
Well, you have a much higher win rate against me than those players, so that would be one of the reasons that I would think that.
If that's any measure, yeah. I mean,
isn't that a good measure from a single human being's point of view? Bill is like about a 50% win rate against me, right? The average
that's more than my win rate against you, but you might have been tilting the scale a little bit.
Yeah, the one day I ever didn't metagame against you, you beat me twice in the tournament. What was I supposed to do? Right?
You have no other option.
Because I knew Bill was going to be in the finals. I needed to build my deck to win the tournament.
I'm so appreciative that you had that much faith in me.
I obviously did. I played 4 Sabo's Web in Blue.
Like I said, the only science that Mike subscribes to is the fact that you won the meetup that week. So,
also that, I didn't realize I didn't even think about until you mentioned it that this is like maybe the New York 1K, like
it's the
I don't want to
curse.
say it's like not a curse, but it's like the opposite of a curse. Like whatever deck wins the meetup before, because I was like, because I haven't taken down a meetup like prior to that one, and so I won like the round robin meetup, and I was kind of like I was happy to win it, but I was also like, damn, like it was a 4-person meetup, like kind of like
you used all your luck on the wrong day.
That's literally, I came home and I was like, I'm glad I got it, but like, so damn, like I'm gonna go in this 1K and I've like used it all up.
Yeah, you're like, Mike's not even posting this on TC decks. It's so small.
There wasn't enough players. I mean, like, at 4 players, like you're gonna list the top 4 players. That's like, I don't know. That's scraping the wrong spot.
I'm in agreement, but that's how I was like, damn, like it's not gonna get. But like, you're
like nobody will know.
Well, people know because they know from this now. But the thing I would say that to me. Is, and I think it's like part of the joke is like I always metagaming against Landy, is that like there could be 32 players in the room, right? But there's not 31 players who I'm afraid of. That's the way that I look at it, and I'm like, I've never been wrong about this thing, which is that the road to victory goes through Lanny. I have to beat Lanny to win the tournament, right? So like metagaming against Lanny is done well for me. I could pick a variety of decks that are good, but I'll try to pick the one that's good against Lanny because he's one of the players who I respect. I really thought you were going to like literally, it wasn't even red, green, oath pollution. In all of my chaotic descriptions, talking to my friends, I'm like, Bill is going to be in the finals. Like I said it over and over. Like, and like Lanny will tell you, and he's like, what are you talking about? He's going to be in the finals. He won the meetup. He beat me on Thursday. Like, how could he not be in the finals? Right? I have to play Sabo's Web. Right? Like that's literally my thought process.
I mean, everyone had to play Sabo's Web. Like this is just where we are at with the format.
Now it's just the Sabo's Web format. Here's the thing. I think the deck is probably good enough that it will continue to perform even if everybody's playing at Sabo's Web. It just won't perform at a 90% clip.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is a moment where, like, imagine Stiflenaught comes out before anyone's ready for Stiflenaught. Like, I feel like that's where we are with Red Green Oath. Is like, it's not an unbeatable deck. It's very good. Like, it's very good.
It's weirdly good. So, from your perspective, after just like not losing a match with it, like
in two tournaments,
yeah, like
never lose.
What's your give us your take. How are you feeling?
So overall, I'm 12-2. My losses, because I played it at the meetup before the round robin meetup as well. And my losses were to Elves with like a really good start and a naturalized, and to the deck Cam was playing that's like a artifact prison deck.
Is that the
Mono Brown?
Was that the meetup that I played Doomsday?
Yes.
Okay.
How did that go? How did that matchup go? I was curious. Because you played against Cam in that one, right?
No, I did not play against
Cam.
I played against a different Enchantress player, so Lanny thought I played against Cam, but I played against different
okay. Yeah, the deck that Cam's building, I think, is like, it looked really impressive. I think the games that we played were interesting. The one that was like one of my only losses with this deck so far. They're interesting because I feel like they were very draw-go dependent, because we both... or draw play dependent, because we're both running Sphere of Resistance.
That's interesting.
Also, you know, he has lands that can tap for 2 mana on turn 1. So it makes it like a really interesting dynamic between the two decks.
But that also makes them like increased vulnerability to your Rishodon ports and Thermokarsts if he's got.
Yeah, so it's very much like a race to like who locks down and it seems like it really feels like those games are over within the first 3 turns, but that's like the game hasn't ended, but like it's effectively ended in those 3 turns.
What's his win condition?
There was some artifact that I think like bounced stuff to my. I can't remember exactly how, but like he got there with like, with Masticore Beats.
Okay.
It's Cam, so probably Words of Wind.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just like thinking, because one of the things about the blue-red Tinker deck is, aside from Altar of Dementia, the win cons are all like Karn and Masticore, and those both trigger Oath of Druid. So
right, but he has this card that can bounce Tanglewire back to his hand, and he just plays Tanglewire and over again. And so I get the worst end of Tanglewire, and he gets like, you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
I can't remember.
Is it Umbilicus? Is that the name of it?
Maybe. This is my first time seeing the cards.
So yeah. Just notably, I played Red Green Oath Peluche at a brewery meetup the week that Fran won the 9-rounder that he won. So I played his version. I thought it was really good. But I lost a round at that one. I lost it to Bill just playing Elves. Just so.
Yeah, I think even though the deck is ready for Elves, I think like Elves can have a really good start. So here's the thing, like we're talking about like how good is this deck? I think what's surprising about it is how many really good turn 2 plays it has. Like you kind of always have something good to do on turn 2. Either you have the hand where like you kill a land on turn 2 because you have Thermokarst and a Mox Diamond, and like, or you drop, you can like, if you're going to do the watch through on some of the, you have like the stream, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Commentary on that. You'll probably see, like, I think the game that I played against Jeff, who was on Burn on stream, like some of my turn 1 and turn 2 plays against him were like nightmares for him. Like I have really bad karma coming from Jeff the next time we play, because I have like just unreal draws against him. Like I think like he played Jackal-Pup and I played either turn 1 or turn 2 Oath. It's like
bolt my Jackal-Pup.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. That's
and then like game 2, I think I had like either turn 1 or turn 2 Sphere of Resistance, and it's just like, it's what's weird is like, Mike, you were talking about on one of the podcasts, like you don't see how this deck could beat burn, and I was sort of with you there, but like seeing how
you played it,
yeah, and I was like, wow, this actually like is, because I had, so keep in mind, as a person who's mostly been jamming elves, I have not beat burn like ever in Premodern. I've had some really close games where I almost beat burn, but I have never actually closed out a best of 3 against burn.
I remember, like, in the match we played when I was red green and you were elves, like, I didn't have Oath in game 1, but you just had like an extra vigilante that game. Like, you just, even if I had Oath, you would have just taken care of it, right? Like,
depends how quick you get it and how quick I am. You know?
No, I'm just saying in the game we played, right? Yeah. Like you had a spare vigilante in game 1, and then the other game, like, you just cast a natural order pretty fast. And it seemed to me like it'd be really hard for Oath Pollution to beat like you have a 7/7 on turn 3, right? Like, I have to have a pretty good Terravor, and you know, if you I don't know if you had Wire in the version you were playing, but like you just have a Wire there or something. Like, even if I have a Terravor, I'm just going to lose to the 7/7 anyway. You know, that was my interpretation. And again, this is like 2 games we played. So
yeah, I mean, versus elves, your Stone Rains are the worst, right? But if you have Sphere Resistance, like, you're a lot better against elves, and then, you know, you might not draw.
It depends how quickly you get the sphere down too, because the matches that I lost against elves, you know, I had the Earthquake, I had the Sphere, but like you get the Sphere down to try to stop them, but they generate so much mana, and then like, oh, now my Earthquake's a little bit awkward under a Sphere. Like, it's like you have to kind of sequence those plays, like, and that, you know, you're sequencing sometimes based on what you draw, right? Yeah. So you're like, this is my best defense right now is Sphere. Oh, and then I draw Earthquake. Oh, awkward, you know, and like I draw tap land. You know, they're the play against elves. I think elves probably has, even though we're talking about a deck that has, you know, depending on which version you're looking at, 4 Pyros and an Earthquake, for Pyroclasm and an Earthquake, or just the 4 Pyroclasm, still I think has a decent matchup against, I think probably like a 50-50-ish, or maybe even in Elves' favor.
Yeah. Well, luckily for, you know, Christmas land, Elves is just on the decline. So
sadly, because I want to play Elves more, because the deck is really fun.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're all Elves fans, but yeah, it's interesting. I think what you're saying is like pretty. It's actually true of all of these Terravor Oath variants, especially ones that now run for Sylvan Library, which is seeming to be imminently correct. So like between your Sylvans, Oaths, and Sphere Resistance, your turn 2s are really excellent, and then Mox Diamond just kind of helps break that. I think this podcast might have underrated the mana efficiency of, like, one thing that just used to drive me crazy was just like, Fran would just be like, oh, you know, Rishadan Port, like, you're always doing something with your mana, like you're porting them, or you're like, he's like, you can port them with your mana. And I'm just like, I was just like, how is that using your mana? It doesn't do anything. It's just like, it just taps one of their lands. Like, what if they just drew an extra land?
No, it's also a virtual 1 for 2, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're tapping 2 lands to their 1.
Tapping 2 lands to just tap their land, and they're not getting anything. But if they're otherwise mana screwed from
the rest of your deck,
it's like a virtual mind twist, right? Well, so when you do this, like, it just blanks all the cards in their hand for that turn.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that got me was just that I just don't think about Rishadan Port as value. Like, I don't, like, when you're like, oh, I'm using my mana efficiently, it's like, well, what are you trading for? You're trading, like you said, it's a virtual 2 for 1. You're trading for 1 of their mana, and it's just like, you know, like, no cardboard is exchanged here.
Well, right? here's where that tilts is, if you have Rishadan Port and keep it open, then suddenly every creature land becomes like unplayable, because like they tap to activate. It's like, okay, I tap to tap. And so like there was a couple of times, like, I think also this might tell me if y'all feel differently about this, but I think the land still matchup is also not like I would, if I was theory crafting it, I would say, oh, like this red green Oath deck is going to tear up land still. But in experience, like, Landstill was kind of a tough matchup, and when you're under the standstill and you're just you have the ability to tap their creature lands, it's like actually like lets you draw out the game a lot.
Yeah. Let me be clear. I don't think the standstill player should ever cast the card standstill against the deck with 2 more lands, 4 more creature lands, and several more utility lands.
Really?
Just
what
like,
if they just draw Dust Bowl?
Once again, Mike,
you
just port the Dust Bowl and then you waste it.
So like I don't think that the red-green matchup is the same as the green-white matchup. The green-white matchup is just like unwinnable for green-white in the lands against Landstill. I think red-green's demonstrably better than green-white, but I think intuitively blue-white should be at an advantage, and I would be fine casting Standstill.
I mean, I've on just the angle of Dust Bowl, you're gonna be playing 4 Dust Bowls against 4 Wastelands. Your deck has fewer lands to feed to your Dust Bowl. And you're also on like casting Standstill creates a clock for yourself. So because your opponent has utility land advantage, and not only that, if they ever got a Stone Rain off, right, they traded a spell for a land. So then the only axis that matters is just like who has more lands. It's just like if you consider that the Stone Rains count as net lands, like we're talking about a deck that has 36 lands versus a deck that has 26.
So like draw 3 cards. Not bad.
If you play,
that's true. But then you're just gambling, right? Because like, I mean, if the standstill player opens their hand and it's just like, 6 lands in a standstill, yeah, obviously cast standstill. But if you cast like, I mean, how often have you played against a standstill player? They've cast standstill and then they miss a land drop somewhere down the line. And like you hit all of yours. Like if you hit all your land drops against a standstill player who misses like a single land drop, they're like cooked.
I've also done that standstill.
I think it's kind of draw. I think it's kind of early game draw dependent. Like I think this would be a rare matchup where like standstill going first is actually like pretty important for them because the red green best draws in this matchup are probably Mox dependent. And
correct. Yeah.
And if you go first, you can kind of counteract a Mox draw. I wouldn't advocate casting a standstill necessarily on the second turn, but if the blue-white player can get 2 clean 1-for-1 exchanges in the first 4 turns, I think they're probably 99% to win the game at that point, right? The red-green deck, even if it has Sylvan Library, I don't think can withstand 2 clean 1-for-1 changes in the first 4 turns, and you just go standstill and like all the like the stuff you're talking about, just like just Rishodon port them, and then just you're gonna blow them out with like Dust Bowl and land drops at that point, because at that point, if you've done those exchanges, you can get an advantageous trade with a Decree of Justice, and then the game probably becomes insurmountable. There's not enough threats in the red green deck if you've already just traded 1-for-1 twice.
I mean, to be clear, every game that I've watched Fran play against Landstill, or every game that I've seen this deck play against Landstill, the Landstill player never gets above 4 lands.
Yeah, so I mean, I've watched Fran play also, and those games all involve the Landstill player breaking their own standstill by accident. Like it's like that's not good science. Like I just don't know how to.
Yeah. Like I said, I agree that the population of players who choose to play the deck standstill, like I really hate bringing up this friggin' Tormod's Crypt all the time, but just really
that happened in the finals of Europe.
It just happens sometimes. Sometimes it's in the finals of a continental tournament. And I'm just scratching my head here, like look, it's whatever. You're playing against friggin' Parfait for like 17 hours, and you're just like at that point, like I totally understand the context. But yeah, obviously it makes it difficult. And once again, we'll just leave that one to get worked out by the people. If we want somebody to, we'll just add it to the list of money matches that Mike is going to play against red green. It's just going to money match Burn versus red green and then Landstill. Any other decks you want to add to the list, Mike, of money matches?
Pause for a second, Lanny. There's a lot of things I just want to address. First of all, like I said before, I think red green is far better against Landstill than green white was, right? Because you have twice as many man lands, which means that your likelihood of falling behind against standstill is like demonstrably less than the green white version. That's one thing, but the bigger thing is I just don't think Landstill is probably a viable choice right now. So I just don't think it's worth the science to work this out, because if Sabo's Web becomes good because it's
Yeah,
getting its
then
red
Landstill
green,
is just
like Landstill is just
extremely
doomed.
Catching
Right?
strays,
Like,
yeah.
like it's so bad against Sabo's Web, right? So like you just, what would be the point of proving this point, right? That's like
Fair,
okay,
fair. Yeah.
like
I'm very glad that where we land is just like, well, this would be fun to test, except for the fact that nobody should ever play Landstill.
No one should ever play this deck right now.
So-
Like, why would I want to waste my time on this one? Like, if I lose the red money match, fine, right? Like, that's at least a deck.
Yeah, this is like
right?
this is the Thor meme where it's just like, maybe I can't kill you, but he will, and then it's Sabo's Web. It's just like, well, I mean, for what it's worth, Bill's on your side. He said it's at least feels harder than advertised.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other kind of observations you had with the tournament? Any stories from the tournament? Anything kind of cool happen besides crushing half of the Spike Colony podcast?
So I'll just roll through some of the stuff real quick. So round 1 was against Landstill. I lost the first match to Dust Bowl.
First
game, yeah. And I was very much like, damn, is this like a really bad matchup that I wouldn't have expected? Like I was going into game 2 thinking like, damn, I'm supposed to be the Ponza deck, and I like totally Ponza it out. But I did get the next 2. Pretty sure I got there with elephant tokens, and like opponent had to cast a factor fiction under sphere, and they pulled up like they did get a they did see a Swords Plowshares, but like they couldn't cast because they only had 1 mana open.
Ooh, love it.
Yeah, brutal. Round 2 against Burn, I just had the God hands like both games. Like I said, Jeff owes me a really bad beating next time we play, probably, assuming that luck evens out. Round 3 was against like Terra Geddon that splashes blue
Proman's
for middling.
Proman's deck, yeah.
Yeah. This one I feel like I'm just very favored because like he
You
has
have the
more,
card Oath of Druids.
but also he has more like big mana spells that he wants to play, and I'm just like ponzing him out in the meantime. But there was a cool moment in game 2 where he just found a way to deck me out through my Oath of Druids. Like there became like this, like it was in part because he kept getting Terravors off the top, and so his Terravor is the same size as my Terravor, and so I have to like I attack and do a lethal attack, but that kills his Terravor. But then he would just play another creature, which would be a Terravor. Then I'm like decking myself out to get another Terravor. I was like, damn, this sucks.
Yeah, he should have hit you with the Wax Wayne, just like wax my Terravor. GG.
So, I mean, Bill had a hard road, with the exception of Landstill, which he said was a challenging matchup in round 1. Every single person he played made top 8 then, right?
Like Perlman made top 8, Ferris made top 8, I made top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then you double drew, or no, and then you drew after me. So there's one match missing. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, that's all 5 matches. Yeah, so, and then obviously you handshake. So your opponent match win percentage must have been like 80. Just like,
it was like I think it was like close to 70. I'd never seen an opponent match win percentage that high because I mostly just play like weeklies, So
yeah, exactly.
I was like, holy shit.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What I wanted to now since I met Finkel, I get to tell Finkel stories. Finkel asked me, he's like, what are the best decks in Premodern? I explained it was this red green.
Finkel asked you about Premodern?
Yeah.
He's never asked me about Premodern.
Well, he probably doesn't want to hear it from you, Mike, because he's tired of you.
He's tired of me.
Because you make a mistake every single turn. Why would he want to talk to you about anything Magic?
I mean, he actually thinks I'm a very effective Magic coach, including of him.
Well, he didn't tell me that.
He just doesn't want to watch me play.
He didn't share that with me.
He once kicks me out of his hotel room before the standard portion of Nationals because he said I was making too much sense, and that he just wanted to play what he wanted to play.
Fair enough.
He made top 8 of that tournament, by the way.
So he's like, what are the 3 best decks? And I explained to him that the current best deck in Premodern is a Terravor Oath of Druids red green Pawns deck. And then he asked me, he was like, doesn't that just like he's like a Ponza deck. He's like, what does that beat? He's like, what, like, he's like, what's Terravor? And I was like, it's a Lurgoyf. And he's just like, and you don't have like Forbidden Orchard. Like how do they trigger Oath? And I'm like, that's the fun part. You just cast your Terravors. And anyways, he's just like, well, how does that beat any control deck? Does that just lose to any control deck? And I'm like, well, two fun observations. One, control is unplayable in Premodern. And two, the premier control deck in Premodern is based around standstill and utility lands, and you have 12 more of those than they do. Anyway, so I got to tell a Finkel story. That was fun. So who'd you play in the first round of top? Who'd you play in the first round of the top 8?
Christine. No, I played
Christine
Phil
in top 4,
on Phil on Goblins.
Goblins, yeah. Okay,
was that a competitive match or did it go 2?
I got it in 2, and it was also like I had I think game 1 I had first turn Sphere, and then I had in game 2 I did get hit with the Lackey
Siege Gang,
but I had Pyroclasm in hand, and I actually had 2 Pyroclasms. Like opening hand, I think had either 1 or 2 Pyroclasms in it, and I was like,
yeah,
like I could probably lose this, but
ban this deck.
I think likely, yeah. Well, there's definitely
unacceptable
plot
deck.
It's just plot armor.
There's
like the things he says, like, listen to how much plot armor I had.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Win the meetup.
Yeah, definitely.
Win the meetup the week of.
That is the rule. That is the rule. I should have played red green.
Well, this is also. I also
no
like.
Shit,
I have it.
We all should have
together right now, but I literally have it 75 in a box.
You got to go grab a Mossfire Valley for this Forgotten Cave. Anyways,
I thought it was a Shivan Orchard or whatever. No, Shivan Oasis.
No. Shivan Oasis is atrocious. Like I'm gonna break with Fran on this one. Why? Like no lands that come into play tap besides Treetop.
I have a
in your
forgotten cave in that spot right now, but I mean, obviously, I own a Mossfire Valley. I can switch it up.
Yeah, make it a Mossfire Valley. So you beat Goblins. Wait, so you've double Pyro. Did you draw a Pyroclasm in game 1?
No, I didn't. The build that I had was the 1 Earthquake, 1 Pyroclasm.
Oh, did you draw Earthquake in game 1?
No, I didn't. So I know that Franz talked about like double Pyroclasm being the way, but I sort of disagree there because I feel like if you're not in a creature matchup, then you're adding more blank cards.
Yeah,
and
you have a Blaze. Blaze is good enough sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can take down a elephant token and opposing. I mean, what are the creatures in Premodern with greater than 2 toughness? Just Exalted Angel and.
And then 12.
And Phyrexian Dreadnought. Earthquake or Dreadnought.
you need 13 mana. Well, actually, you probably need about 15 mana because of your own sphere.
Yeah.
So, like,
I would love to Earthquake a Phyrexian Negator. Maybe like a Carnophage with the Bad Moon on top of it. How many? Is there really just Elephant Token, Exalted Angel, and Phyrexian Dreadnought? Am I missing something super obvious?
Things that have above 2 toughness?
Yeah.
Ravenous Baloth.
Shadow Mage Infiltrator.
Oh, there we go. Johnny himself.
Ravenous Baloth is a medium played card.
A right? Quirion Dryad if your opponent's very lucky.
Quirion Dryad, I think, is one of the better cards in that matchup, honestly. I don't know if we want to get into that now. But,
it's the best card. I wanted to do a quick aside. We should talk about your match against Christine, because Christine was playing Blue-White Flippy, which is a deck that's on the rise. And if Blue-White Flippy can't beat Red-Green, maybe it should stop rising. But I wanted to just do a quick aside. I've had some fun experiences against this Red-Green deck this week. I queued up Goblins for the online league. I had to play against Christmas Land Death twice. In the first one, it's on video versus Fran, where I just go Lackey Siege Gang Pile Driver, and Fran just drew one of the 2 Pyroclasms. And that was disgusting. And then the next game, I like naturalized an Oath of Druids, and then he drew another Oath of Druids, had another Oath of Druids. And, whatever I connected with Lackey, I had a board, and Terravor stared me down. Then I queued up some burn, some Lanny burn, my bobbleless 4 Vortex burn, and I opened on Jackal Pup, And
Lanny sent me the screenshot of this one.
And I ended the game staring down two 14/14 Terravors. I had a Ball Lightning in my hand, 3 Jackal Pups, and a Mog Fanatic in play, and my opponent was at 7. And I could.
How did that next turn go? Did he attack you with one Terravor, or he attacked you with both and just killed you?
Well, I had no outs because I was dead. I was dead on board. So my opponent has two 14/14 Terravors, has 7 life. I have a ball, 3 Jackal Pups, and a Mog Fanatic. And the Ball Lightning is my last card. I literally drew the nuts. Unless like the Mog Fanatic was a Fire Blast, then it would be like the Stone Nuts.
If the Ball Lightning were a Fire Blast, you would have won the game.
That's correct, because I would have gotten in for exactly. I would have gotten one for +1. But yeah, he could
log your own Jackal Pup in combat if you needed to.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't need to because the trigger, I can respond to the trigger, or my opponent would be. Anyways, the point is, I had an unbelievable burn hand, triple Jackal Pup. My opponent just like Oath to Druids, oaths out a Terravor. Their turn 3 to just cast a Terravor. They're both 14/14s, and I'm just like, okay, well, this deck is heinous. Got him in the next 2 though because of Price of Progress.
Yeah, I told you it's a good matchup.
I mean, it's a good matchup for me because my burn deck plays 22 lands. So I always have outs to draw out of the thing. Most of the burn matches we've seen, the burn player just dies with like 3 lands or 2 or 3 lands in play, or no lands in play.
I have a good eligible card for 3/3s. That I actually toyed with playing it on Sunday, but I didn't test it at all. And I think this is a card that people should consider playing in a variety of decks. I think it's probably pretty good. Is Aboshan Cephalid Emperor? Do you know what this card is?
Is this the... No, I don't know what it is. I'm thinking of Cephalid Constable, which is also a sick card, but yeah.
Yeah, so Bill, do you know what Aboshan Cephalid Emperor is?
This is an Odyssey card? I'm
is this the one that's like 3 UU? This card is not playable.
It's actually probably phenomenal in Premodern.
It's right 4 UU! What?
Okay, do you not see it? You just don't see it.
I see its casting cost, Mike. That's all I need.
Do you think you're going to cast this card?
Oh, Jesus.
So if you oath this card up,
no,
I think you're auto win in the oath matches, right? Like it's pretty big. It's too big to Pyroclasm. If you ever oath it up, your opponent can't win.
Oh, it Pyroblast.
Well, excuse me?
Pyroblast.
You could, yes, Pyroblast is the out, right? But if you play multiple Aboshans, right? Like they can never attack you. You don't even, if you have UUU, you can stop all their creatures, but like it's big enough to fight like a Mishra's Factory by itself. It just taps to tap things down. They can't defend either. You
heard it here first, y'all. The next big thing is a blue-green oath deck featuring Aboshan Cephalid Emperor.
No, I think it might be pretty good against other people's oath in other blue
For
decks.
the listeners that don't have Scryfall up, Aboshan Cephalid Emperor, 4 UU creature, legendary creature, Cephalid. Text is tap an untapped Cephalid you control, tap target permanent. So opposition for Cephalids, and then activated ability UUU, tap all creatures without flying. This is just a moat on a octopus, and this is, I don't know where this ranks in the scale of like Gaia's Blessing Stasis to above, because I guess Gaia's Blessing Stasis is now stock in Stasis.
Some of us were just ahead of the curve, it seems.
But
say some of us were ahead of the curve. They were like 2 years ahead of the curve.
Some of us, not me, definitely not me, but some of us, someone on this call.
You won your PSS.
Yeah,
I finished in the top 8.
So what happened versus Blue White Flippy, Bill?
So Sphere is really good in this matchup, not surprisingly. So that's mostly how I think game 1 I played 1 or 2 Spheres, and that really just grinded them to a halt. Game 2 was more interesting. Christine got out an Angel, and we like
that's pretty good against you. It's hard to Earthquake and Exalt an Angel, as we mentioned.
She was beating me down pretty bad with that one. But what ended up happening is I got the Oath kind of late. Then we're kind of racing a little bit, but obviously I'm losing for a turn and not gaining anything. But I think she made a misplay here she ended up playing a Mom. And
you get the second trigger and then you just got huge.
Yeah. And it was really like, I think if the Terravore didn't grow as much as it did, then we go to gain. Well, also there was a point where she had to swords one of my Terravores, but of course I gain, 15 life or something, or no, I gained something in the ballpark of like 14, 15 life, and then that suddenly changes the math of the race, like not totally in my favor, but like I have a lot more draws now. I have a lot more to do, like game left,
Well, that changes it a lot, right? Like, especially if her plan is to try to win by clocking you out with a 4/5, right? That's like 3 time walks.
Yeah. And Pyroclasm is pretty effective against a deck that has like Mom Savannah Lions and
she has
Meddling Mage.
Silver Knight, Galena's Knight Mom. I mean, like,
Silver Knight is pretty good, but didn't end up coming.
But Silver Knight doesn't brawl with Mishra's Factory, so how good can it be?
It also triggers Oath, so if I get
there's a lot of problems with Silver Knight, and only one upside, which is that.
Well, fair enough. Yeah, you make a point.
I've got another one, Lanny. I think this one might be a good eligible card above 3 toughness. Can't really earthquake it, and it'd be good in an Oath situation. What about Blinding Angel?
I like Blinding Angel. That's pretty. Blinding Angel is pretty sick.
I think my thesis is red green is obviously a very good deck, a tier 1 deck, but like part of the reason it's so effective right now is just people refuse to play any cards that are good against it. Right? Like even when I was playing Sabo's Web, you're like, what kind of world are we in where we have to play Sabo's Web? It's just like, what if someone said, what kind of world
are we in?
To be clear,
I don't think that Blinding Angel is the card to be the. Because we're once again revisiting a new classics by calling discussion is just like what cards are good against what cards. Like, what cards are good? What cards? Your proposal is like Blinding Angel being good against Terravore or Oath of Druids. Like, it's just kind of like, okay, but Blinding Angel isn't very good in a lot of other contexts, and that's the problem. Like, at least Sabo's Web draws a card, right? And at least Sabo's Web hoses Landstill, the Rock, and random. I mean, every Oath deck these days runs for Treetop Village, so. Mm-hmm. So Sabo's Web is still the best, as I'm saying, because of how flexible it is. There's not too many. Like, the other card that's really good against Red Green Oath is Gush, and evidently it's not enough. So,
well, I think like if you go back to like kind of what are the nuts and bolts of why Red Green is so effective, and even the questions that John asked you about Red Green, is that like. The deck has an interesting proactive plan, but the reason that it wins games is because Oath makes the timeline it needs to play games much shorter, right? Like if Red Green had to play, like, I'm going to put this in air quotes, like a legitimate game of Magic, it would win far fewer because the clock is so slow. But Oath makes it so that you can get like a 1919 Terravore and win in 1 attack, right? Like that's a thing.
I would think about it differently. I would just say that Oath makes it like, Oath does exactly what Oath does. Your opponent can't advance. So the fact that you take so long to kill them, is effectively mitigated by the fact that it's like your opponent can't kill you, at least through the traditional means. I mean, I'm not going to say it again. Oath of Druids is just, everyone knows what I think about Oath of Druids. So we can talk about the finals now, which was pretty cool. Pretty cool finals. I think there's some interesting things that had happened after. So I was playing Grotog. I was playing my spiced up Grotog, and I asked Fran the other week. After losing to Bill, I was just like, how'd you lose to Grotog? And he was like, I'm 2-1 against Grotog. And I'm like, oh, so the deck really just doesn't lose to anything. I kind of just mirrored that experience, winning both game 1s against Bill the 2 times we met. And then Bill just sideboards into a deck that has Call the Herd and a few removal spells, and that's just like that does the trick.
He goes from being a Ponza Prison deck to just like a mono green mid range deck, basically, right? Like
with Pyroclast.
Here's my 3/3.
Pyroclast is pretty disgusting. So we had an interesting one the first time we matched up. I was like, I got to trigger Bill's Oath of Druids, and I was like, this is gonna be sick. I'm gonna hit Psychotog, and then my Psychotog is gonna be insurmountable threat. And then, of course, I hit Korean Dryad. But even if I had hit Psychotog in several of these situations, Bill just has me covered with Pyroblast. It's just kind of like very rude that the best thing that I could do is
blastable.
Yeah. I mean, just like consider your blinding angel situation. It's like, what if you just can't time the blinding angel? What if it's just like, oh, okay, I'll trigger oath. It's just like flip over 100 lands and blinding angel. It's like blinding angel doesn't have haste, you know? It's like you got to flip a fervent, whatever, the charge, reckless charge at the same time.
I am willing to do that.
Sure.
I'm willing to do that.
But yeah, what was your POV on our games?
Me?
Bill.
Oh.
The guest that we're talking over.
So, in the finals, it was funny because we kind of went back and forth, just locking each other out of the game. Like you had the Queer Dryad out, then you followed up with Meddling Mage, naming Oath of Druids, and then I think followed that up with Pyroclasm. And my only out there, I'm sorry, Meddling Mage naming Pyroclasm. And my only out there, I had a Sylvan Library out, and I drew 2 fetch lands off of it, so I was digging deep. I got to look at like 9 cards.
Yeah, and this sequence was actually even more tenuous because I went turn 1 Meddling Mage, naming Oath. You went turn 1 Sylvan Library. I went turn 2 Quirion Dryad. So I have a 2/2 Meddling Mage and a 1/1 Quirion Dryad. So like you have Earthquake Pyroclasm in your deck that's just gonna like end my career in 3 looks at it if you don't already have it in hand. And I think what you did was like you fetched a mountain, and then I was like, oh no.
Yeah. It definitely looked like I was flexing the muscle there, but I did not have it. And I knew there was a point where when the Dryad was like a 4/4 and I was still at like 7 life. And I was like, if I get the Earthquake, I don't think you know about that. And unless you had days, I figured that you would have me on the most recent Fran list, which the only difference is that I had the Earthquake instead of one of the Pyroclasms. So it was like my one little secret edge, and I just did not but I can't complain about having 9 looks for the card. You know what I mean?
You're still a red-green deck. It's not like, it's not like you were like Portent, Impulse, Portent, and then you didn't see it. It's just kind of like you had a lot of turns with Sylvan. I mean, it's the only way that I can win as it turned out, which actually ended up being very strange because my strategy for the matchup was like, well, I have to board out Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage is too vulnerable to everything. It gets blasted, it gets pyroed, it triggers Oath of Druids, so it has to name Oath of Druids, and it's just like giving you free material, right? It just gets blocked by Mishra's Factory.
But it turns on Pyroclasm.
The most fearsome creature in the format, besides Terravor, just can't get in. But I think I viewed the matchup wrong because if I was like focusing all my resources around Armageddon, I can cut off the blocking with manlands angle, and it names Oath of Druid, so it actually reduces Pyroclasm to the only.
What do you mean? I watched you cast 3 Armageddons against Bill, and he won every single time.
No, that's my point. Is like every time I cast Armageddon, I just had nothing behind it, and so it's like even a 2/2 is better to have behind.
In one of those games, you Armageddon 3 manlands and left yourself with 2 Moxes and still lost, right? That was
right. But imagine I have a Meddling Mage on the table and it's naming Terravor. Then all of a sudden my position looks really good because then Bill needs to find his next manland or find an Oath of Druids, and then Oath of Druids I can like Ray of Revelation and get back. I think it's still interesting. Like, we also went the other direction. Like, what if I board out all my creatures except for Psychotalk and just like wait until I have Psychotalk double counterspell for Pyroblasts or whatever. But alas, none of these things came to fore as Bill just gave me the business.
I had a really
hard
time watching the finals because I wanted to cheer against Lanny because he had beaten me in the top 4, but then I also wanted to cheer against Bill because I didn't want Fran to be right. So it was like it was a tough dilemma for me.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry to go through that.
I mean, to be fair, my experience of the 3 of us is probably the most important in the finals, so I thank you for recognizing that, Bill.
Yeah. I have like a small aside. What do we think about 4-2-1 as payouts for top 8? Because basically every single match you play is $100 match. And then conceivably the finals, if you don't split, could be a $200 match. Because, but then the thing is like, it feels like a $200 match if you can split the finals. So let me break it down. The quarterfinal match, the prize jump is 100 to at least 200. But if you're going to negotiate a split in the finals, then it's 100 to 300, which feels crazy. So the top 4 can split. Everybody can leave with 200 and just cut their losses. But if somebody's a non-splitter, then then that match all of a sudden feels like it's for $200, which is crazy. And then you can play a finals where the if you're still with a non-splitter in the finals, the final split count is 200 versus 400. 200 is the same as if the top 4 went for a split. So if you get to the finals and then you lose, then you might as well should have negotiated. Anyways, I don't know. It's a very weird dynamic, come to think of it. And the reason I ask is because Bearded Dragon is actually going to be the same thing, 42175.
So we never even so obviously the 3 of us plus Christine were all in the top 4. We never discussed any kind of a split.
I was never gonna split with you, Mike.
Why? Because
I want your money. Because I want your money.
It wasn't my money. I hadn't earned it yet. You just won money that Sonny put in.
Something.
Although it is like crazy. Like after all that work, I got like $100 like that. And
it could have been 200. I mean, I was gonna never split until like I saw Bill in the finals, and I was just like, well, I lost to him. I still think I have a good matchup, but I also was just like, I'm gonna feel horrible if I lose this match. Like I'm just gonna feel like despondent. Like I was like, I'm literally never gonna recover if I lose this match. And
you're never gonna recover.
Yeah. Like I'm just quitting Premodern if I just like am out $100 to $200 on a match of Magic.
You sound like me before I've had fried chicken.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, like you're just like I'm just.
It would take an incredible amount of fried chicken to come back from like a $200 match of Magic, and it's just like it's interesting because like obviously people are Premodern. It's not about the money. Is the money is ruining Premodern? And I actually did kind of feel like, man, at this point I was like bloodthirsty. I was just like just killing everyone. It's like no splits. And I got to the pinnacle, and I was just like. We should probably split.
What if the top 4 matches had been reversed and I had Bill and you had Christine? You wouldn't have wanted to split there. Seems like Christine has a good matchup against you.
Yeah, Christine has a great matchup against me.
Thank God Christine drew with me at the last round of the Swiss because
that's true. You wouldn't have gotten past her. Everyone kind of just. I guess that Bill really did have the plot armor because my stubbornness really got him in a great spot every single time. So flashback, one thing that so Mike and I played in round 3. We started 2-0. We played in round 3. Mike offered the draw to try to for the both of us to close out, because if we drew, we would still basically get 2 win-ins, assuming that our breakers held. And I decided to play, but playing gave me Bill in the following round. And then once again, weird. Plenty of bracketology could have happened, but like, yeah, if Mike or me run against Christine, then Christine maybe finds herself in the finals. And then I don't think Bill had a bad matchup in the top 8 though. So maybe he was just destined.
Christine shouldn't even have been there. In the same round, I believe that we played, Christine was up against it was an interesting deck, an Esper control deck with all basic lands. So like not all basic lands, like polluted Delta driving into islands and swamps. Right. Like, so this player had back to basics, which is basically like the blue Sabos web, right? Yeah. Like that. It's quite interesting, right? And Christine engineered a spot where she was able to Swords to Plowshares a Morphling by getting her opponent had 9 land in play. And her remaining cards were like another Swords to Plowshares and a Cataclysm. And she had a Mom, and she attacked with it and said, go. And like in that spot, she could have just cast a Cataclysm, reduced her opponent to 1 land. I think she probably would have been able to get there, by, faster than he would have been able to. But instead, he just cast another Morphling, and he had like 9 land in play. And so I think she shouldn't even have been there. I think like she probably should have just started off like 4-0 or something, and she still top forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Her deck was highly effective.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have engineered a split facing down what I knew to be a bad matchup, but I guess that's something that I should be introspective about and maybe like adjust my no splitting. I do think top 4 splits at this level, where it's like everybody leaves with 200, is like pretty clean. I think maybe I just never split with Michael J because on principle, but yeah, I don't know. I'll soften up. You wouldn't.
So if we ran the volleyball 1K top 4, you wouldn't split there.
The top four, there wasn't enough juice in that top four because we were playing like the breakdown on that the cash breakdown on that tournament was very thin because we didn't cap. Yeah,
I came first and I think I walked away with 150 or something.
At that point, let's just play Magic, right? It's just like once we start talking like $100, $200, then I actually don't imagine, like I can't believe how pros do it. Like I would just be devastated if I get bumped out of the top 8.
But there's like a lot of illegal collusion and prize splitting.
I know there's a lot of splitting and some of it. I know you can. I know you can. You can legally split the finals too.
No, but there's like, I mean,
I know. We're not getting into the collusion behavior. Anyways, but
tempting worm is above 3 toughness. I'm looking through all of the.
Bill, what are your thoughts on? I mean, you told me, Bill, you were just like, I don't care about the prize. I care about the victory.
Well, here's the thing: is like, yeah, like I'm all for prize splitting, but like I'm not for prize splitting and we don't play it out.
Yeah,
like,
you have to.
Someone needs to take first. Like I remember, like not to throw anyone under the bus, but I was at a big pauper tournament one time, and they just shook hands at the end, and I was like, I like stayed to watch, and I was like, what? Like
you guys ruined my evening.
I strubbed out. I didn't make top 8. I was like, but I'm gonna stay. I love Pauper. I'm gonna be playing in Pauper 1K tomorrow.
Yeah. Where's the drama?
Yeah, it's like, come on, like this is because you watch because you enjoy Magic, but also there's like a story that unfolds as the bracket gets smaller, and you're
Bill,
like,
do you know what you're gonna play tomorrow?
I have gone back and forth. Like, honestly, if you ask me any day, like there was a moment where I was going to like, is it snow control? But like, I think I'm just going to stick with Cogate, blue-white Cogates. And I've always done well with the deck. Like I brought it to, I think 5 FNMs and won 4 of them. So pretty good results.
It's the same people, right? Same store that you usually play this at?
Yeah, and there's probably going to be, like, I imagine there's going to be some grinders from Philly there that are really good.
Pauper grinders that come to New York from Philadelphia to play.
Yeah,
to play.
That's who. But this is why I have some empathy for them, because this is one of the players that we're talking about split the finals. They had to go all the way back to Philly, so I was like. I was like, okay, I get it. You want to get the fuck out of New York before it's like 10 p.m. and you get back to Philly.
Yeah, the later it is, the easier traffic is. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised because like Michael J and I would like drive to Philly in a heartbeat for a pre-modern 1K. But it's just because
there's no pre-modern 1K this week.
I know it's kind of a drag.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, like why aren't we at a tournament right now, guys?
Yeah.
Sunny.
Well, I love that we're getting so many more tournaments now.
The tournaments rule. I mean, Bill, you heard me say it. I was saying that the tournament was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest I've ever played. I mean, LobsterCon gave me the hardest matches. This probably gave me the hardest set of matches on average. What was, how did you feel about the intensity of this tournament compared to others that you've gone to? Because you were, I assume you were at Sacred Torch, and you were in.
I was at the volleyball one. Which one? Sacred Torch?
Sacred Torch was the first Bifrost.
Oh no, I didn't get to go to that one. You know why I didn't go to that one was because I was trying to buy into Elves, and I was like, I could use the $60 or however much the entry was. I was like,
you would just
most of the way towards a guy's cradle.
Oh wow!
You could have just borrowed.
Sure, but I think it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if like
I would have lent you an Elves deck.
Okay, well, I don't know if I knew that at the time.
Mike has 11 Gaia's Cradles. He has enough Gaia's Cradles for to give everyone else at a tournament. Sure. A tournament in which he would just go and play Burn, of course.
I would, in fact, if I were giving 3 Elves decks out, I would play Burn. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would also play Burn at that tournament.
But, yeah. You would borrow the Elves deck from Michael J and then play Burn
and give it into Burn.
Or double switch up. You would borrow the Elves deck and then play Dreadnought.
There we go.
Because I would be on Burn.
Yes, correct.
That would be fantastic. I would golf clap that one.
Yeah, that would just be a Michael J move. I've always thought about doing that to you, like just asking for a sideboard card. I would just be like, hey, Mike, can you bring like 4 more chills? And then you'd be like, oh, I'm not playing red. And I'm just like, play the only deck that loses, like the deck that's only bad matchup is red. And they're just like, boom. Gotcha.
I think just on that point, I think Sabo's Web is just going to transform the format insofar that if it becomes popular, like land still gets so much worse, but other random decks get so much worse. Just Fluctuator, like
Fluctuator is hilarious. Yeah.
If Sabo's Web is a legal card.
I want to at least bring this point up, which is simply that not everyone, like Premodern is still, I mean, we have a pretty rapidly changing metagame, but lest we forget, Bill, you were like the only red-green player in the room.
No, there were
week. Two red-green players. Yeah. So two
really?
out
Was there another player?
He didn't do as well as Bill. He was like somewhere in the other part of the room.
Yeah. Didn't have the plot armor.
But Lanny, there's also a lot of Landstill players. They just were all in the back.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I think about it is that I want to try to understand what goes on in sort of pre-modern metagames in other regions that are less sensitive to change, which oftentimes can be bad for these deck of the week type decks, because in many ways these decks kind of benefit from narrower metagames. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, like Bill was saying, it's just like, when Dreadnought was unleashed onto the scene, especially initially in the mono blue version, it was just like, the Shrimp crew just doing great with the deck, because people were unprepared. But one kind of weird caveat to that is like, if you come up with like a secret weapon and people are simply just playing decks that aren't like, that are just like not great decks in the metagame, but like happen to be good against your secret weapon. So it's possible that red green has no bad matchups into an open field, but I just think it's interesting because some people are just like, it's just not registering, right? People aren't bringing it to their thing, or maybe the size of their meetup is like the size of their meetup is like 10. So for one red green player to show up as 10% of the metagame, like it's just a possibility that it's just not there.
Do you think red green's good enough for a ban? And if so, what would you ban?
I would ban the card Oath of Druids.
I think that's probably the thing.
Oath of Druids is.
If Oath of Druids gets banned, then is land tax unbannable?
No. So I would ban Oath of Druids and Survival of the Fittest at the same time.
Whoa, hot takes.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
So
barf.
So
I wasn't ready to hear that on this podcast.
Yeah, so I don't think so. To be clear, so Oath of Druids is a card that is keeping. It's very hard for me to think about like the second order effects of everything, but I have like a general thing. It's just like, oh yeah, land tax got banned. Why did land tax got banned? Like everyone's arguments are generally horrible because there's too much noise. Like people just cited so many things about the feels and the vibes of land tax, and one argument that I think was there are two arguments that were very strong. There were three arguments that I felt were pretty good. One is just that land tax mirrors were going to start happening more, and the more that they start happening, the more miserable everyone would be. One was it's like a super it's the most powerful card advantage engine in the format, and I really, and this Martin Berlin put it in his blog post where he's just like, you can't trade well against the land tax because the best trade you have is wane or demystify, right? And I really took issue with that because there's a lot of context there, which is just like, you don't have to trade with the land tax. Land tax only gives you land, and then you also trade advantageously every time there's in-lane tutorment in the mix, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you just boil it down to just be like, look at the pre-modern format, what are the card advantage engines in the pre-modern format now that land tax is gone? And we had that discussion a couple of weeks ago, and it's like Survival of the Fittest, and then like, I don't know, Enormous Gap, and then it's just like
Enchantress.
Enchantress. So Survival of the Fittest and Enchantress, and then like Mulch Rack, Sylvan Library plus Zern, Sylvan
plus
Library. Sylvan Library plus things, Gush plus a bunch of cantrips, like.
But Survival's the only one that's kind of a self-contained one.
Yeah, Survival is kind of feels super unfair. Enchantress is kind of like You know,
You have to be playing Enchantress.
Yeah, you have to playing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no, that is enough.
Yeah,
you have to be playing Enchantress is enough versus like survival can. I wasn't there a monthly where there was survival goblins in the top in the top.
What?
That sounds atrocious, but maybe. Sure.
I believe there was a monthly with survival goblins in the top.
Regardless, it feels like one thing is like, okay, I don't think like red green needs to get oath banned. I don't think like Terravor needs to get oath banned. Like to be fair, I'm okay playing in this pre-modern because this pre-modern is very interesting. I think that the Dreadnought deck, the red green deck, and goblins all have interesting play against each other. And then I think that all the decks below, despite the fact that they're not as good as those three decks, like have interesting play against each other and into those decks a lot of the time. Like I wasn't happy. Like I do think that Oath of Druids made like a couple games that I played like really, really like, you know, well, that just super sucks, but it didn't like super suck in a range of like, I never want to experience this, or I don't want this to be my regular experience. Because it's still interesting. I mean, it's not terribly interesting, but it's still interesting to be like the goblins player and be like naturalize your oath and like try to build a thing. It's fun to like build like, oh, maybe I can get this turn where I can play a bunch of hasty goblins all at the same time. That's all interesting. But yeah, if oath gets banned, it feels to me like, okay, well, Oath of Druids is really good against a deck that contains 30 creatures, and now like survival decks with like 30 creatures in a lot of different flavors, survival just becomes this kind of plug and play thing where you can build a lot of impressive stuff against it. And then if you don't have to fear oath, if the next two things you have to fear are Swords to Plowshares and Pyroclasm, because like Ray of Revelation doesn't trade well against an oath, right? Or against a survival. Then Survival of the Fittest starts looking like looking kind of sad. And like the reason the reason why I would be interested in a format without Oath of Druids is because I'd be interested in a format that had cards like Nimble Mongoose or Weather Wayfarer or Elephant Token or Dothy Slayer, Carnophage stuff, like black or red creatures, Lava War Muse, and like whatever. And I'm just like, all those creatures would get obsoleted by Survival of the Fittest instead, because survival would just be better.
I was actually going to list Nimble Mongoose as a creature with above 2 toughness that's playable. Tempting Worm, Eternal Dragon. Those are cards that I think are playable versus a Pyroclasm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, only sometimes when it comes to Nimble Mongoose.
The goose is loose, Slaney. The goose is loose.
The goose is
gonna have Earthquake.
Rarely
Nimble
loose.
Mongoose.
Yeah. There you go.
Well,
Earthquake.
Let me tell you about how much threshold they might have because you're blowing up all of their lands. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then if you have 4 mana, then the goose became very tight.
Once again, you can block with your Terravor, you can just trade with a man land, or you can trigger your Oath of Druids.
The question was not whether or not the goose could beat a Terrafor. It was just, is there a playable creature that has above 2 toughness?
Like Anorid Brushhopper is like the most efficient creature in the pre-modern format, and it's super sweet, and it's just like not good because of Oath of Druids and maybe other stuff.
You
but
can
it's
just
like
discard 2 cards a turn.
Yeah, true. With the land tax in the mix, you can have a 3/4.
Oh my God. I'm literally going to have an aneurysm over this now.
Anyways, what do you think, Bill? Bill, you sound to me, having played the deck, like you're kind of in the, I mean, do you, let's just ask a simple question. Overrated, underrated, or rated adequately? Red, green.
Rated adequately. I think it's a very good deck. I saw the video Fran put out with it, and I think like I'm not like an amazing deck builder, but I think I'm very good at recognizing like this deck is nuts, and whether or not anyone recognizes it's nuts, it does not matter. I know it's nuts, and when I saw Fran play it, I was like, this is one of those decks. I know that like there's been some conversation like, oh well, you can't sideboard out of 8 Pawns of Land Destruction spells, right?
I've been known to say this. Yes,
you can do that in certain matches, and I think I pretty much did against you. But the other thing is like the weird thing, and this is like the thing with land destruction in any format. At times, Pauper has been terrorized by red-green land destruction. Is every deck plays lands, so it's like your worst card like actually still does something. You know what I mean? Like it's still like if I destroy a City of Brass, like like in the Grotog matchup, it's like it's like if I had to keep a couple in because I can't sideboard enough out, like it's still like the worst. Like my worst thing is I can take you off a color source. You know what I mean? It's like that's like the worst thing the card does. It's still like, but in some matchups it's like, and we all know what it's like to draw awkward hands with like just a couple lands and then you get one killed and it's like, oh well, there's my game. I can never recover from this. I think land destruction is a difficult thing in any format where it's good, and so seeing like, oh, this is like a really good land destruction deck, plus Oath of Druids, plus Pyroclasm. I was like, that is just like, just what that adds up to be is like we've been talking like, does it have any bad matchups? It's like, well, if you're like one of your worst cards just kills lands, and sometimes you're like, there's going to be a percentage where your opponent like just doesn't draw very good, like in terms of having like many lands in their hand, then like suddenly now that's really good. Like even as
your
like,
baseline, you have a high baseline because there's just enough percentage of the time versus any deck that exists.
Yeah, period. Yeah,
that they'll have a 2 or 3 lander, or they just won't draw into more lands, or you, the deck with 8 Stone Rains. Most of the time you'll draw 1 or 2, but sometimes you'll draw 4, and it's just like, once again, sometimes you'll draw your Mox Diamond. It's just like, once again, any deck you play against doesn't have a plan for not having any lands in play.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think it's accurately rated. I think it's got to be one of the best decks in the format.
But you're saying it's accurately rated as one of the 3 best.
Yeah, accurately rated as
possibly
phenomenal.
The best deck.
Yeah. It's just like,
just to be clear, right?
Impossible to underrate, at least.
Should not be underrated. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think it's very interesting because I really had that level of reaction. The thing that you're describing, that's how I felt about green white, where I was just like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, this deck has Oath of Druid, Sphere Resistance, and then Mana Disruption. So it's like, I can't be a combo player because of Sphere Resistance. I can't play a deck that has creatures because there's no creature that brawls with the Terravor besides your own Terravor. Like, Akroma can't brawl with Terravor. Like, Dreadnought sometimes can't brawl with Terravor, and then obviously, it dies to everything. So,
but green-white never had the win rate of green-red. Like, I think green-white is just grossly overrated. It's just not that good.
Well,
I think red is
to be clear, green-white had an impressive win rate. Like, in the time since its introduction, like, obviously it didn't win 11 straight 1K. Like, it didn't win like a bunch of Swiss tournaments with 30 plus players like in a row like Red Green did, but it did make a splash. And I was very, very impressed by the deck.
It's a viable deck. It was.
But I'm just saying, like, the analysis that I had on it is mirroring what Bill says, which is just kind of like, okay, like, what is good against this thing? Like, Mike, it's not like one thing that you said is like, oh, this deck has like a giant, weakness in the form of, these kind of like theoretical things. But once you actually like sat down and were playing Magic against these decks, especially, this deck, too, like both these decks have 31, 32 mana sources. Like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, sure, maybe it's this huge weakness that the deck is all mana sources, but like when you're actually playing Magic against them, you don't feel like,
I've played both decks. Like, red green deck has twice as many man lands, so it is far less punished by the fact that it has so much mana because it has a higher likelihood of being able to close the game out. Right. It also can put the opponent in a position where they can't interact with your man lands very well. This is just doing nothing.
Bill, did you? Because you've seen people playing the mono green list at Meetup, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played against the mono green one.
Okay. I guess my question is, like, did you have the opportunity to see that list, and did you have any reaction to it?
I also thought that was very good, but seeing the reds, like the red splash, because things that you get from the red splash is you get a way to like clear the board early game, right? But you also get, which is super important in like the matchups that like you need it in, right? Which are elves, goblins, maybe flippy. You need like that's like keeps you from being totally blown out. But you also get Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, and that is also like enormous in some matchups. You know, yeah, I don't know. I think like the Red Splash really does something for the deck that the mono green version, which I still wanted to play, I just didn't have the Mox Diamonds at the time. And I would have played the mono green version for like one of the reasons that I'm drawn to this deck and elves is mono like green decks are playable in Premodern. Like they're very good in Premodern, and they are just not like green is hurting bad in Pauper. Like green, like there's like no great green deck. Like you can play like Boggles, you can play Ponza, but like those are not consistently good decks. Elves is not good in Pauper. So I was like, I want to play some green decks in a format that like green decks are good in. And I would have happily played the mono green version. I'm trying to get some of the cards for the green white version just to play that. Just, you know, I don't think it's going to be as good as the red green version. But yeah, so that's sort of like, I think that the, you know, green red, the red splash is a notable improvement.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's kind of where we all landed. It was just kind of like we talked about it a little bit on Facebook this week, where you know, it's just kind of like if the green red deck is so good and there's only 2 red cards in the main deck, like surely if you just cut all the red cards and just exchange them for a couple more cards, it would be better. It would be close to as good. We wouldn't know if it would be a strictly better situation, but one important thing to note is just that like this version of the deck that has maximum Sylvan library, you know, and it didn't have the smokestack plus exploration synergy, and it doesn't have the sort of Hickory Woodlot angle. Some of these sort of different angles that it has, you know, also ended up being the right mix, and then the red cards were just like the perfect hedge against, you know, as you said, it's just like, well, your opponent can go wide.
The presence of cards like Wooded Foothills actually makes the Sylvan libraries better, right? It's not
well. There's Wooded Foothills in the mono green deck.
Yeah, then it's not just getting value out of playing one mountain. I think that's just a miss. Also, the smokestack version is an evolution, right? Like, didn't Thursday win the Misty tournament with just the absolute regularist?
Yeah, he didn't have smokestack in the list at the time, and it's kind of just one of those things where you know, there was this is like just a crazy time in Premodern, which is just that we have all these tournaments. So like the same thing could have actually, I mean, we don't know if the mono green version could have done the same thing because there weren't enough tournaments to play it in. And then obviously the Fran effect can't be understated, right? So this red green deck, you know, existed in some circles, but you know, Fran with a couple of tune-ups and you know, very publicly having a great run with it, got the ball rolling where in a way that it wouldn't have. And that's actually the same thing that happened with Blue-White Dreadnought, not so much because Fran was a little newer to the scene. And people weren't adopting what he was pushing, but when it got to the point where it was, you know, the green white deck, like, you know, he let out the green white deck, and it felt like the next 2 months, you know, versions of his list as he conceived it were kind of everywhere. Like they were in Europe, right? And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. But yeah, this red green thing is just been so accelerated, just because obviously it's a great deck. And people have just gotten to play it in tournaments that are, you know, where there's just such a high density of like big tournaments that it's got to play in. And then being the champion, being the winner of a tournament is so much like has so much of a bigger influence than being in top 2, top 4, top 8, right? Like you said, there's like another pilot, you know, there's 2 pilots in the room. One won the tournament. The other one didn't make top 8, right? So if it was any other deck, that might just look to you like, oh, whatever, 50% conversion, and then the top 8 is variance. But like, just like the amount of profile you get from just straight up winning a tournament and then doing it several times and it being the same deck, like, makes it feel and look just so much more dramatic. Also, the mono green deck can play Powder Keg. Quick aside, Powder Keg instead of Pyroclasm. So maybe
that comes out way slower though.
Yeah. No, Powder Keg sucks, but
I think Sam said in Non-Idiots that I had underrated the mono green deck. I don't remember that. I always thought that the green white deck was overrated, but I thought the green mono green deck was underrated.
No. So
I thought it was pretty good.
Sam's point is that, and it could be a blend of something that you've said and something that I've said, which is that both of us, our initial reaction was just like, there's no way this green deck, like this green red deck, can be superb, because the mono green deck, which it gets all of its DNA from,
only
was
very good.
Not superb.
Yeah.
No, it's not even. I did not think that deck was only very good. I thought that deck was just good. Like, I thought it was a tier 2 deck, but I wouldn't even put it near the top of tier 2. And then of course I liked green white better. Like, in the context of mono green versus green white, I liked green white. You liked mono green, which is fair.
I liked mono green. I thought it was. I was never sure if it was bad. I never actually played mono green. I'd only watched it be played.
Yeah, but you liked it.
I thought it was much better than green white in my head, right? Yeah. But I played green white because Fran's my friend and I wanted to play his deck, right? Like,
yeah.
But then that's what made me not like green white, because I played
it. Yeah, such a bad experience. Yeah,
this deck is so loose,
so what Sam was saying was just that, like, if our evaluation of green red is so high and there's only 7 red cards in it, then you should just improve your rating of mono green. It's just like whatever 68 out of 75 is in your mono green head, like that can't amount to more than 10%, 7 cards out of 75 can't amount more to like 10% worse. Obviously it can, and that's an oversimplification, but he was just saying, like, we need to raise our evaluation of the mono green list or a potential mono green list on the back of the success of red green. That said, so he's basically saying it's a non-argument, right? If you think the mono green deck isn't very good, and you think that the red green deck shouldn't be very good because it's only better than mono green deck, you shouldn't say lower your evaluation of red green. You should raise your evaluation of green.
So I think that there's still a lot of space to be explored in what we're currently calling mono green. Like, even when it was mono green, I thought it should be red green, right? I was always just like,
yeah, you wanted shard phoenixes in the sideboard
to deal with elves, right? Because one of the things that we've just talked about in this podcast is, like, as an example, is like the red green deck. One of the reasons it's so much better than the mono green deck, at least in terms of its results in the hands of Bill, Fran, etc., is that the presence of a card like a Pyroclasm changes how bad matchups like elves are. And it's like, so
that's
my
4 to 5 of too. That's the critical thing, is because we're talking about is like, oh, if red green is one of the best decks, then mono green, but like 4 or 5 cards that really shore up tough matchups.
60% to draw a red card versus 0% is a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's enormous.
But the thing that you had brought up, and you're like, well, Mike, if you were going to do this and we're going to just basically slightly change our mana base in order to accommodate this, you had the reckless charge idea. I think the reckless charge idea might be better than when we spun up these ideas 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Like right now, if we're just like, okay, this green red deck is like among, if not the best decks, what would give us an edge in the mirror? Reckless charge, you would just win on the spot.
That's the one that has flashback.
Yeah.
Flash it back
you
for R2.
Mill it with the oath. Yeah. So your 1919 Terravore just goes now, right? Like, also it'd be an enormous edge in the mirror, and also you could just hard cast out of your hand. It costs R. So like all these turns where you're just like 3 mana Terravore go, right? Like I watched you do this against Lanny. 3 mana Terravore go. What if you were like 4 mana Terravore reckless charge?
But also it makes your creature lands a potentially like better threat too. So I think that's kind of solid actually.
Yeah, like so.
I have my moments.
The other thing is, if you like, I'm thinking you play 2 reckless charges in the main deck, like something like this. But what if you could go to 4 reckless charges after sideboarding? It would be such a great combination for those games that you're taking out the thermokarsts. So we're just like, what if we accommodated enough space in our deck?
It just became a burn deck.
Yeah,
what are you taking out for that though? You're talking about main deck?
I don't know yet, right? Like it's the same thing as with Sabo's Web. Like I found a way to cram 4 Sabo's Webs into 12-12. I had to stare.
Atrocious. Atrocious.
I only lost to you.
Your deck has 1,000,000 cantrips. Why are you playing 4 of anything?
Anyway, I cast a Sabo's Web against Laney, and I maintain that if I had made it to the finals against you, Bill, those Sabo's Webs would have shown up.
Oh yeah, we're looking at a different winner if it's me, you in the finals, and you have 4 Sabo's Web. I guarantee it.
But my whole point here is maybe I played too many Sabo's Webs, whatever. But the thing that I would say
you certainly did
is that
I'm eternally flattered that you played 4 Sabo's
like 3
Webs
for you.
3 would have been a lot. 3 would have been a lot.
I correctly predicted who was going to be in the finals in my choices. Number 1, I metagamed against Bill, and I failed to metagame against Lanny. I basically declared the winners of this tournament before the tournament started, and I don't think that that's even arguable.
Actually, Christine had more influence in the winner than you or I. By ending up on the different side of the bracket. Electing to draw an incredible matchup. She should have just bounced you out of the top 8. Yeah.
Thank God. But the thing that I would say about that is I also influenced that because I provided Christine.
You provided her with the deck. Fair. All roads
lead to Michael J. But anyway, just in all seriousness, I don't know what we take out yet. I think that there's some pretty loose cards in Red Green right now. Like the Crumble, for example. It's good. But like
you have to have the Crumble.
Maybe like I don't know yet. I'd have to stare at this. But the additional functionality, especially with the elephants, like what if the elephant is just ball lightning? Like that's insane. That's a functionality that's nowhere near the deck right now.
So wait, what about Grim Totem? Curse Totem. Curse
Totem I think is great. I actually said to Fran when you beat me at that meetup was just like if I had Curse Totem, I think I would have had a better chance against Bill. Right?
I thought you were talking about the one where I was on Elves and you were
on Elves and I was on Red Green. You beat me in like 2-0 pretty fast. So but like, the cards I had to bring in were like Pyroclasm and that was it. And you just got, the thing is like, even if I had the cards that are good against you, you beat me in one of the games with Natural Order. So like, it's like, and Oath is pretty spotty against Elves in a sideboard game. Like you have potentially Elvish Lyrist, you have potentially, you have definitely Vigilante, and then you have like 4 Naturalize. Yeah. So like I have to lean much harder on Pyroclasm, but like Natural Order just beats me then, right? Just like land, like I have a 7/7, right? Like Pyroclasm doesn't rescue me anymore. I have to try to win with Oath. Best case scenario, the Oath has a one turn loop window. It's not a big ask for you to have like 1 of 6 answers inside that loop window.
For sure.
Like so, I think like you need another card like a Curse Totem or something because I just don't imagine that this is a great matchup. It's obviously winnable from both sides, but it just doesn't feel like a great matchup to me.
Yeah, I mean it's the deck feels pretty tight to me. I think fitting the Miser's Reckless Charge into the main deck would be like
I would play
fun, interesting thing to. I mean. I can't find the space. I mean, maybe this Phyrexian Furnace, but other than that, like it feels like because I already want the 3rd Zurin Orb, right? Because consider that Michael J would be right, and that the burn player with 4 Price of Progress is matching up against you and your lowly 2 Zurin Orb. Like you're just gonna get cooked.
Well,
like it's
3 to 4 Sulfuric Vortex. Right?
Yeah. Let's.
So.
Don't get me started on Sulfuric Vortex, but yeah, exactly. Like,
but the thing that I would actually answer on this, Laney, is I think the first card you have to change is the 4th Mox. All of the outlier draws.
There's 3 Moxes in the deck right now.
Yes.
Oh, so you want to add the 4th Mox? Yeah.
All of the outlier draws that make this like every time Bill has a Mox on turn 1, he wins the game. Am I wrong, Bill? I could watch you play a bunch.
Yeah. Moxes. I mean, this is just a thing that's true about Premodern, and the Mox probably has one of the highest wins over replacement of a card in your opening hand, like in the format, like no doubt, which is crazy because we always talk about how the format's not very play draw dependent and how tempo doesn't win games in Premodern. It's like, well, it does if you have a Mox. Like,
so like if you look at it, like let's say I'm just gonna say Lancel because it's the first deck I could think of that has Lancel come into play tapped consistently, right? It has Fairy Conclave, Coastal Tower, stuff like that. You're like, all right, I'm going first. It's safe for me to play a land that comes into play tapped. if your opponent now has, first turn Mox Rishodon Port or Mox Sphere of Resistance, your day got a lot harder, right? Like just right there. Like you could even have had the annul. And
you can have the perfect Dreadnought hand, and your opponent can have Mox Meddling Mage.
And so the first thing I'd say is just like, maybe fuck this Mossfire Valley. Maybe that should just be a fourth Mox, because I want the first Mox all the time. I'm sorry, Bill.
No, I can agree with that. Yeah, I like instead of Forgotten Cave, go a fourth Mox.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think 4 is definitely more. It's definitely better in this deck than in other contexts. So weirdly, like we talked about it, right? We were just like, how is it that the best Mox Diamond deck, after all these years, where you're just like, oh, you have to negate the card disadvantage. You have to like have Gush. You have to have land tax. People are out there playing Tithe, Mulch. Rich Shea was like, I'm going to try Sprouting Vines. It's just like, okay, well, what if your deck just said no card advantage, just Sylvan Library, just a card that takes 8 life for you to go +1. Like it's like 8 life and 2 mana to negate the downside of your Mox. It's just like, or what if you just raw dog the Mox out there? You're just like, I don't need an extra card. I don't need an extra card. I've got Stone Rain on 2.
Yeah, but it's like mulliganing to. It's weird. Like it's
mulliganing to being on the play.
Yeah, it's like, so people are like, I mulligan, I give up a card, but in exchange for giving a card, I increase my expectation of winning, right? Like, but this is the case. You're mulliganing to increase your expectation of winning by a lot, right? Like, what if you're just like straight up 75% to win every game that you have a Mox on the first turn? Like, I don't think that that's crazy in the case of this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was the same. I mean, it's the same theory behind Enlightened Tutor or Worldly Tutor in the case of Blue Green Enchantress, which is like, okay, well, would you go to 6 to have this card in your opening hand? It's like, would you go to 6 to have land tax in your opening hand? It's like, yes, I would, please.
Enlightened Tutor and Worldly Tutor are different because the card recovers itself on the next turn. Like, but this doesn't recover itself. It just gives you tempo. I have to go. You guys can continue having a great podcast without me, but
I mean, we just are about to hit the 2-hour mark, which is the magic number. Bill, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I have 2 quick things that I want to say while I'm on your platform, because I want to throw these to some people and see if the ideas. Okay, first thing I want to say is we run 3 Pyroblast / Red Elemental Blast. I think that the correct split is 1 Pyroblast, 2 Red Elemental Blast. I believe because if you have an opponent with a Meddling Mage and they're going to name probably Pyroblast over Red Elemental Blast, just because Red Elemental Blast has more words.
Yep. I mean,
blazing hot take.
Pyroblast is the correct name for Meddling Mage, so I totally agree. You should reduce the number.
If you're gonna split it unevenly, then that's my point.
Also, it's very important to take into account how many beta red blasts you have when making this decision as well.
You might have to Posca a couple. I got a couple Posca'd ones. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Blazing hot take. Okay, what's the second thing that you were gonna say?
Second hot take. Oh, this is not a hot take. This is just, I'm just throwing this. I see.
No, you're probably right. I buy it.
Yeah, a lot of people. This is important because I know we're a couple, like, we're all here. We love a good deck pick. Premodern community. We do a lot of the landscape deck picks, but I normally, because I share mine on Instagram a lot of time, I'll normally do a vertical, like 6 wide, 10 down, and then sideboard below as my deck pick style. I wanted to throw that to the room and see, like, do we feel strongly about one
Bill, what
orientation?
is your Instagram handle?
My Instagram handle is @Bill Ellis, all one word, and then 2 lowercase i's, because I cannot put exclamation points after my name in Instagram.
All right.
So Bill,
I meant to follow this so that I can.
So you're gonna see the deck picks come up in the stories.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm a photographer, so my Instagram is primarily for photography.
But it should be photography of decks.
I can do that too.
So, one, Bill, I commend you on an extraordinarily well lit, glare free deck pick that you posted in Discord and other places of your red green deck. I have some comments on the layout. These treetop villages should not be hanging out all the way on the top right line. It made it very confusing for me because I was like, where are these treetop villages? I have my own personal rules about this. Otherwise, great deck pick. I do think there are a few points about this. One is that not every platform is built the same. So the horizontal deck pick can hang in mobile Twitter feeds a little bit better without cropping. They sometimes come up better in Discord. They allow you to it's hard to say, like, are we looking at our deck picks on our computer more often? That's maybe debatable.
That's why I'm like, this is an interesting point, because I normally think of it like I'm going to throw it on Instagram and the story, it's going to come by. I want it to just fill that whole screen.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting, because you also elected for the 6 across 10, so 6 columns and 10 row deck pick, where we also covered the text box of cards, which
so I want to keep it more image based,
I'm totally down with that. I just feel like the 10 across 6 down, I mean I love the 10 across 6 down deck pick, and I love it with full card view.
I do like that as well. Yeah.
So
that's how I do every single deck.
So
and they look great. Yeah.
It's really tough. So the question,
but then if you do the 10 across 6 down,
you could adapt that to do the same thing. You don't have to cut that. I mean, I don't know. Your deck pick was very aesthetically pleasing, I do have to say.
He's a photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, I got to say, I probably have the highest resolution deck pick that people have made, because this is with a digital medium format camera. So
holy God. Yeah. I thought I thought my 12 megapixels was a lot, but I guess you've got dozens.
We're really doing. We spare no.
I mean,
okay.
Bill,
so this is actually a great argument.
Recently, he made the glare go away.
Your deck pick with that much resolution is even more reason to include the full height of the card instead of overlapping the text box, because you can go in and you can read the text because it's so resolved.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I love. I think I'll say this. I think that we can stand to have some more portrait deck picks hedge in to the deck pick universe, right? There's no reason it should be all horizontal. I think square would be
I love the square format too. Yeah.
Square just goes both ways, and and maybe it's just an editorial decision. You just like look at your deck and you just kind of feel how it goes. So I think it's more, the deck itself is more, because the Magic cards are obviously skinnier than they are wide, right? The deck pick itself, when you go into horizontal, becomes more square because you're tall and your cards are tall. So your deck pick feels very elongated, and I do feel like 9x16 is very aggressively tall, as opposed to like a 1x1 or a 6x4.
The flip side of that, though, is when you look at it on your phone, it feels like you're holding a Magic card.
Ooh, I like that. Oh man, okay. Well, that's something to chew on. Maybe we should have a poll in Non-Idiots. Man, you really left us with a great sentiment there.
Yeah, I mean, because look, we're pre-modern players. We love deck picks out here. This is like a third of the format as you want to see the decks, right?
It's like 95% of the
I'm happy to give it that. Yeah,
it's irrelevant.
Yeah, no, good point. I think we need to step up our deck pick game and our deck pick creativity at the same level. We got to think about tuning deck picks, those last few slots, those last few decisions in your deck pick, the same way that we think about adding Reckless Charge to our red-green decks. And thanks for sharing that, Bill. And I'm definitely gonna cook on that.
Definitely gonna do the red Elemental Blast Pyroblast split now.
This has been Spy Colony 31. Any shout outs, Bill, before we call it?
I just want to do gotta shout out Sunny. Thank you so much to Endless Life Brewing for hosting the tournament. Thanks to everyone who came out. A lot of great games. I also have to just plug, because I also do a podcast. It is not a Magic podcast, but if you are a fan of the anime One Piece, as I very much am, I do a podcast with two of my friends. It's called the Very, Very, very strongest One Piece podcast. So come over and join us there if you enjoy anime and One Piece.
I've never seen One Piece, but
Oh,
Kenji
this is
Samura
the
used to wear a
greatest
One Piece
work
hat.
of fiction. Yeah, greatest work. Okay, just my only. I won't give you the whole One Piece spiel because I could go on for hours, and I literally have. It's recorded. But One Piece, like, greatest work of fiction of all time, in my opinion. And like, imagine if you were just like, as Tolkien was coming out with every Lord of the Rings book, you could just read it as it came out. That is what, like, when One Piece is finished, it will be that level of like, and it already is that level of like important work of fiction, period. For our, like, that's what our time is like, we have One Piece.
I have never heard any level of aplomb about One Piece like this level before. The main thing, and I don't know anything about One Piece, this is not a judgment when I say this. The main thing I've read about One Piece as a non-One Piece aficionado, at present, maybe I'll become one as a result of this conversation, is that there's a lot of filler. That's like the one thing I've heard over and over again about it. One
Piece is extremely long. The most recent chapter that came out this week is chapter 1109. There is filler in the anime, absolutely. The filler, like a lot of animes will have filler to ensure that they do not catch up to the source material as it's being released. Like they'll come out with filler episodes. I would say that I've never watched a lot of the filler before, but for the podcast, we're watching it from the beginning and talking about it. And so I'm experiencing some of this filler for the first time. And I'll say that even the filler episodes, you get great character moments. So even though they do not, One Piece has this way of like, every part of the plot kind of weaves into every other part of the plot in ways that initially do not make sense to you. But if you rewatch from the beginning, you're like, wait, this thing that we didn't get until episode 300 is actually first like seeded lightly in episode like 19. And like, there's just like hundreds of like little threads like that. It's when you break down how One Piece is written, it's like, how can a person even think to write a story this way? Like to have seen it all from the beginning in a way.
All right.
But yeah, that's my spiel on One Piece. Big fan, love it. Should definitely check it out. And yeah, if you like One Piece already, come check out the podcast.
The very, very strongest.
Three varies. The very, 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 very strongest One Piece podcast.
TVVV.
It's
very, very, very strongest One Piece podcast.
We named it that because one of the most important tracks on like the One Piece soundtrack is called "The Very, Very, Very Strongest." So it's named after one of the tracks from the OST.
I was thinking about doing a Ruby podcast with my daughter. We never did it.
Yeah, well,
Jerry Thompson said he would have listened though.
No time to start a podcast. Better than now. This has been Spike Colony 31. Thank you. Bill, for joining. Congratulations
to Bill.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah,
just really sick win. And another feather in the cap of Magical Christmas Land Death. Love Spike Colony.
Love Mike. Bye. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This was fun.
Game over.